Welcome to PTK Pulse, a podcast by Alpha Theta Omicron, Phi Theta Kappa's Honor Society chapter of Rio Salado College. My name is Marilena Aguirre Foster. I am chapter president and today's host. This episode marks the beginning of our new season for our 2025 Honors in Action Research Project. This year, we're exploring accessibility and inclusion in storytelling. Throughout the season, we'll be speaking with advocates, leaders, and community members who are going to help us rethink what inclusion looks like in education. In today's episode, Unheard Stories, Audra on Barriers and Belonging, I'm joined by Audra Paletta, a passionate advocate for accessibility and inclusion. Together, we'll talk about her experiences, the barriers she's faced, and what belonging means to her. Audra, welcome to PTK Pulse. It's wonderful to have you here. How are you today?
It's awesome to be here. I'm doing good, thank you. How are you?
Good, I'm good, thank you. So to start us off, can you tell us a little bit about your background, your experiences, and what accessibility means to you?
I was born and raised in Phoenix. I've been in Arizona pretty much my entire life. And I was raised in a middle-class family. So my parents had access to, resources around the community. And I always like to make a point of that because it definitely influenced the way I grew up. When I was 3 years old, my preschool teacher noticed that I wasn't responding to her and I didn't seem to be paying attention, which was very out of character for me because I'm a talker and I love to be in the middle of everything. So she told my parents, hey, I think that Audra might have a hearing disability because she had a son who was deaf. Mm-hmm. And so my parents took me to get my hearing tested, and that's when they discovered I had mild to moderate hearing loss. So they fitted me for hearing aids, and then they put me in speech and hearing therapy. I already had language skills, so they wanted to build on that. A couple of years passed, and, when you have hearing aids, you get your hearing tested once or twice a year. And after a couple of years, they noticed that I was actually progressively losing my hearing in both ears. So they told my parents, just be ready. Eventually she's going to become profoundly deaf. So by the time I was 8 years old, I did reach that profoundly deaf status. And that's when I was officially diagnosed with, it's a long term, profound bilateral sensorineural hearing loss, which basically is fancy speak for I am deaf in both ears. And I got a cochlear implant on my right side. And that's when I started to navigate the journey behind assistive technology and accessibility because I'm still profoundly deaf in this ear. I have no assistance on this side. During that time, I started learning how to lip read, and I became really focused on learning how to communicate with others in a normal sense, just talk, face-to-face talking. And I really had to find out a lot about my barriers and what I needed in order to be successful in my everyday world. As an adult, I was diagnosed with some other things like mental health disabilities, some gastrointestinal issues, and polycystic ovarian syndrome. So I had to learn how to navigate those on top of my hearing disability with all the things that my body has to deal with, and had to figure out my limitations and also figure out what it is that I am capable of doing or that I can eventually do. So in that regard, I had to figure out what was accessible to me, which I know is what we're talking about today. So for me, accessibility is really it's the big and little things that help us participate in our world. So there are things that make it hard for me to be part of society in whatever way, shape, or form. And accessibility is what will give me those opportunities. And not just me, but, just the disability community in general, which is something that I work in, and I'm very, very passionate about it. It's what I do for my job, and it's something that I'm surrounded by because it's also in my own household. So that is so accessibility is a big part of everyday conversations, just because of the dynamics that I'm constantly surrounded by.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing. That's really, really beautiful, and to hear along the way how new barriers came up that you had to navigate. Accessibility, like you said, has been a part of your life for a long time. So thank you for sharing that. Were there any particular moments or experiences that really opened your eyes to how important accessibility and inclusion are?
Well, I had to think back quite a few years because I was raised in a sense of me being my deafness was it wasn't nothing, but it was just like, whatever, like, it's there, like, you just happen to be deaf, but you're still all these things. So I had to really think back, and I actually pulled my parents in for this one. But they reminded me of this experience I had when I was probably about 10. I went to the movie theaters with my parents. I don't remember what we were saying, but they have caption boxes, and those are meant to be accessibility tools. Well, none of them were working or functioning properly. So I was upset, and my parents were like, "Do you want to go home?" And I said, "No, why should I have to be the one who has to give up the fun just because they don't want to accommodate me?" So I ended up sitting through the movie, and I didn't understand anything. And my parents said I was really miserable. I did remember this after they talked about it. And I also remember that after that experience, I actually stopped going to the movies for a very long time because of it. And I didn't really start going back to the movies until my adulthood. And so that was something that really deterred me from being able to do something that just normal, regular, everyday people do. Also, when I was also younger, my family liked to take road trips to New Mexico and other areas of the four quarters of the United States. I think it's Colorado, Nevada, New Mexico, and Arizona.
Oh,
I think. Yes, that's it. But
ignore me.
But we have family in New Mexico, so that's where my grandmother grew up. So that we tend to go there. So we also love to go to historical sites of Arizona. So they were recounting times we went to Taos, New Mexico, and Bisbee, Arizona. And my cochlear implant was something happened and it stopped working. And that's not really something you can do much about when you're on the go. But that meant I had no hearing. So I wasn't really able to be as engaged in what was going on. And my family did their best to try to help me adapt to the situation, but they didn't really know what to do either. So that definitely still sticks out to me, because I just remember, like in Bisbee, you can take the mine tour, the tour of the mines. It was cool. It was freezing, but I couldn't hear the tour guide. And I didn't know where my parents were going. And if they were sitting in the front seat talking about something that had to do with what we were doing, I wouldn't know. So, and back then we didn't have the kind of technology that we do now. We had smartphones, but we had like the old iPhone models and Blackberries, and we still had flip phones. Yeah. We didn't have the stuff we do now. So that definitely created much more of a barrier because there weren't any options. And those things stick with me because that's when I really started to realize that life was unfair. I didn't understand accessibility or inclusion because I was young at that time, but I understood that life wasn't fair. And of course, I have other examples from growing up, but those were like my first memories of having that feeling.
Wow. It's so hard to hear, especially that it's at such a young age, because that's really what, as our project, we're trying to highlight, is that it's not just that there isn't full accessibility to make it easier on people, it's that people are really getting excluded completely. And it is really an interesting transition, because you mentioned your earliest memory being reminded, it's really from your parents' lens and how that was with them. You've shared before that your daughter has also been a part of your journey in advocacy. Can you tell us about your experiences together?
Oof. So my daughter has the same diagnosis, hearing diagnosis I do, the exact same. Her progression was a lot faster than mine. I was profoundly deaf in both ears by 8, 9, and she received her cochlear implants before we could figure out when she would be profoundly deaf, but she would have been probably around 5, and she was 2 when she received her cochlear implants. A lot of people don't know. Here's a little fun fact for you. When you receive a cochlear implant, that surgery takes away all of your remaining hearing. It doesn't matter what level of deafness you are.
Wow.
So if for any reason we wanted to reverse the surgeries and take out the implant, we're not getting her hearing back. So that's one of the, I guess, long-term side effects of needle cochlear implants. So when she was diagnosed, and I remember her getting diagnosed because it was right before COVID, and they did the hearing test, and then the hearing doctor broke the news to me, and I remember I was sitting with my parents, and I was not surprised because I knew when I was pregnant with her that it was very likely that my hearing loss was genetic. My hearing loss came from my parents' recessive genes, and this is where the biology comes in, of course. They have the recessive genes. I was just the lucky one. But because of my dominant gene, I knew there was a very giant likelihood that she would have the same or similar disability. So I wasn't surprised. I was a little sad, and I definitely also sometimes feel a sense of guilt because I know it comes from my genetics. But when she got her cochlear implant, I was like, I'm so glad that she has a mom who is deaf, who already has these experiences and can help her navigate all the barriers she's eventually going to have to deal with as she grows up. And the first thing I started with was putting her in Phoenix State School for the Deaf. So she was old enough to go to preschool. So I threw her in there. She started to learn sign language. She started to learn how to navigate the world a little bit. In the throes of all of this, I was dealing with her behavior issues. So because she couldn't communicate and she didn't know how to express her emotions properly, we were dealing with a lot of meltdowns, kicking, screaming, throwing stuff, biting a couple times. And there was a lot of, having to use restraint, like hugging her where she couldn't move her arms just to calm her down for a minute. It was very intense. And I was doing this mainly by myself. I became a single mom when she was 1.5 years old. So that was, most of that journey has been on me. After she received her cochlear implants, she started to learn, she was already learning sign language. I can't say that, but she was learning more about spoken English, and she was going in speech therapy. I was at her IEP meetings, making sure her goals were being reached, making sure her needs were being met, asking the hard questions. And there was a long period of time where it was just me learning how to navigate the special education system. Because when I was in school, I had an IEP, and in high school I had a 504, but I didn't have half of the support that she needs. I didn't need half of the support that she needs. When she was 7, actually almost a year, no, we're coming up on 1 year ago, she was diagnosed with ADHD. And we put her on medication, and boom, that solved a lot of the behavior issues we were having. So there was that period of time where, again, just navigating her education journey. Okay, she's got ADHD, let's navigate that. At that point, we had moved to Mesa, and I had put her in Sequoia Deaf School, which was absolutely phenomenal for her. She grew. I've never seen her grow so fast. And then the school closed. It was devastating for me. It was devastating for the other parents. Me advocated hard to keep that school open, but unfortunately, the district, because it was a charter district, was just not in a position to keep it open. All these transitions that are happening, and it can be very overwhelming sometimes. In this case, I have found out that right now I really am her best advocate because I may not have had these experiences because I went to public school, I was mainstreamed, but I have an idea of what it is that she needs in order to be successful in education.
That's so beautiful. And you're right, you really have that very specific experience that you can connect with her, not only as a parent, but as an advocate. Mm-hmm. And so it's really surprising to hear that you are the only deaf parent in her school. And so what has that looked like? Have you found times that you've had to advocate for the both of you together?
Yes, for sure. I do. I have had the experience where I feel like as an adult, I am able to speak for, I don't like to try to speak for the deaf community because I am just one deaf individual and my story is so different from others. But that wasn't in those times when they're looking for guidance. I tried to be like that one person. I don't think it's fair to generalize just based off of one person's testimony, just because of my personal experiences. But I do feel like I have enough of a connection with the deaf community to have an understanding of what some of them feel about different issues. So when there were certain things they wanted, yes, they did look to me. I did offer, advice or suggestions or input. I did try to give some perspective, but at the end of the day, it came down to, like, I may be the only deaf parent, but I'm not the only deaf person in the world. And that has affected both of us, I think, in that sense, is I have not had to advocate for myself nearly as much as I've had to advocate for her. And that part of that journey has been very different. It has been a learning experience. And I never thought that I would have to deal with that. But I don't think any parent thinks they have to go through those things with their kids. It just comes with the territory. So that's really the only case where I've had to advocate for both of us. Yes, we have the same diagnosis, but we're two very different people. So my role right now is she's 8 years old. So I'm starting to encourage her to learn how to advocate for herself. And it's going to take a long time, but she will get there. So that's kind of where the advocacy journey for both of us is looking right now, is a lot of learning for both of us.
Definitely. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's really, really impactful. What do you wish educators and especially policymakers, because as we know, with accessibility, with everything in our daily lives, it comes down to the policies that are in place to protect us. So what do you wish the educators and policymakers better understood about families navigating these accessibility services and issues that come with them?
Okay, I'm not sure if you knew this, but Arizona is considered one of the best states for resources.
Really?
It is. And when you look at the programs that we offer, that the state offers, yeah, we do very well. The issue is that there's so much red tape because you have to go through all the bureaucratic levels.
Right.
So one thing I wish that policymakers and educators knew about navigating accessibility systems is it's never going to get done overnight. Cochlear implants, for example, those are accessibility tools for us. If we paid out of pocket for the surgery and the actual implant and all the parts that we need, it is over $100,000.
Wow.
It's a lot of money. A lot of families can't afford it. So insurance is a necessity.
Yes.
My daughter was very fortunate. She had access. So access was able to cover the surgery and the cost of the implants. I was not that fortunate. My parents did have good insurance, but they still had to pay out-of-pocket costs. But I never really realized how expensive it was. So when you need a new part for a cochlear, or you need something for transcribing, or or an accommodation tool that you use in school that has to be approved through insurance, it's not happening overnight. It'll take days, weeks, months, sometimes even years, depending on what it is. Also, when you're trying to navigate, systems of care, like Division of Developmental Disabilities, or Access, or SNAP, food stamp program and all that also takes time. So that stuff is not happening overnight either.
Right.
And I don't think, sometimes I do feel like educators and policymakers forget that the way the systems are set up are not always successful or efficient. And that makes it frustrating on the families who might feel a certain pressure to provide this information or that information. So if I wanted to get my daughter evaluated for anything at all, because she goes to a private school, they can't do that. So I have to go to her home school in our district, and they have a certain number of days to respond to that. And then the actual evaluation, and then they have to get the results to the school that she goes to, and then you have the IEP meeting. It's a long process.
Yeah.
And so families definitely need a lot of patience from educators and policymakers. And as far as the policymakers are concerned, it's a pain in the butt to have to, go through all that and wait so much time. Why is it taking so much time? I've never understood that. Another thing is accessibility tools are expensive. as I mentioned with the cochlear implant, but that's not the only thing that's expensive. Why is it so expensive? I've honestly never understood that.
And that opens up it really brings light to so many more issues that lie in specific policies that, like you said, it's that redlining, it's the red tape. It's just because it's there doesn't mean it's easy to get, which again really is everything that we are talking about. So I want to shift a little bit to what accessibility looks like in your day-to-day. Can you describe a typical day or setting where accessibility barriers show up for you?
Sure. Would you like me to start from when I wake up in the morning? Okay, so, but seriously, okay, so I will start from when I wake up in the morning because it does start when I wake up. So as a deaf individual, I can't just wake up in the morning to a regular alarm clock like hearing people can. So I wear my smartwatch at night and it vibrates. I have forgotten to set the alarm a couple times. Actually, it just happened a couple of days ago. That was a rude awakening to wake up, look at the time, and realize I was late in getting my daughter ready for school. But so there's that. So if it's not working or the battery dies or something, I'm not waking up.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's that. If I'm not wearing my cochlear implant, the chances of me being able to communicate effectively decrease pretty substantially. I am a lip reader. I have been my whole life, but it's not always easy. It requires a certain level of concentration that a person may not always have because they're tired or they don't feel well. And then when you add my other health issues on top of that, I don't always feel well every day.
Right.
So that makes that concentration, the ability to concentrate on the person's lips harder. I also work from home, which means I have virtual meetings. If I have to make a phone call, I cannot express how much I dislike making phone calls that well because it is such a barrier and people don't realize that. So that is definitely an accessibility barrier that I have. But if I have my own office at home, so I'm able to shut the door and kind of have my own, peace. But sometimes something will happen outside and I won't hear it, but the person that I'm talking to on the computer will.
Wow.
Yeah. And another thing, I drive. If there's this stereotype that deaf people can't drive. I most definitely can drive. And deaf people statistically are actually better drivers because they're required to use their eyes more often because they can't always rely on their ears. I have a sticker on the back of my car that says, person that's deaf with cochlear implant may not always hear emergency vehicles. So if a siren is blaring behind me, I'm not always going to catch it. So I'm usually one of the last people to pull over to the side of the road when an emergency vehicle is coming if I'm not able to see it or hear it within a certain proximity. So that's another barrier is that, I can't control the other cars on the road. I can't control when emergency vehicles are coming, but I have to try to focus on the road at multiple aspects because people are watching mirrors, but I'm also watching behind me to make sure that nothing else is coming. So that's an interesting situation to navigate, especially when I was first learning to drive and just realizing just how much effort it takes to drive when you can't hear. And for the people who are profoundly deaf that don't wear any sort of assistive technology, I'm sure that's a whole other story. Other accessibility barriers, I think that's what I can think of right now. I mean, I know there's more, but it's in the little things. When someone's back is turned to me and I can't see their lips, I'm not going to understand them very well. And in my household, my spouse and my sister-in-law, they're both from Mexico, so they have thick accents. Mm-hmm. There are times where I can't understand them and they have their back turned to me because I need to be able to see their lips.
Right.
So it's the little things that create those barriers, but I don't necessarily think about it because I'm so used to it. And that's my world I've just gotten so used to having to navigate those barriers that they don't feel like barriers anymore. They just feel like part of everyday life.
Oh. Thank you for sharing just your day-to-day as well. And I know you mentioned that there have been mental health challenges as well. I'm a huge advocate for mental health and mental health awareness and mental health just in general for ourselves. So to hear just, you even mentioned if there's days that you aren't feeling 100%, all of these things that you now have become accustomed to, it's just more you have to do to lay on. So I can only imagine the emotional toll that can put on. How are there times that it still can weigh on you or it just builds up? And if so, like, how do you move past that or cope with it?
No one's ever asked me that question. Yeah.
Really? I'm surprised.
I've heard a lot of questions, but not that one. It builds up.
Yeah.
And I think it builds up quickly because a lot of my energy has to be conserved for that focus and that concentration that I need in order to be able to understand people and communicate with people. And again, there are, the days where I just don't feel like myself. There are days where I'm just so frustrated that I can't handle it. And unfortunately, I don't have that healthy of a coping mechanism yet because the diagnosis is still relatively new. So I'm still navigating the emotional barriers that come with it. If my spouse is home, my spouse is my safe space. So I will break down with them. Mm-hmm. And they will comfort me and pat my head, rub my back. It's all right. And usually I feel better after that. But a lot of times I've just learned to take myself away from the situation and do something else. Read a book. I love to read. If I'm still in the mood to listen, I'll listen to music. Believe it or not, work is actually a really good distraction for me. So I'll do that, a little bit of that. There are certain ways that I navigate those situations. A lot of the times when I feel better and I feel calmer, I'll actually sit down with someone, usually my spouse, and I will air my grievances and just vent. And they may not necessarily understand exactly what it is that I'm talking about, but they sit and listen, which is exactly what I'm looking for. So that's kind of how I navigate the mental health side of it. And I'm also really glad you brought that up because a lot of people don't always necessarily link mental health with hearing disabilities, but there is a huge connection between the two of them because if you have to navigate all these obstacles with one disability,
definitely,
it can make you feel frustrated. Mm-hmm. Or if you're in a situation where you feel excluded, there's that feeling of being isolated, and which can lead to higher rates of depression and anxiety, which are two things that I've been diagnosed with. Then those things are not necessarily directly related to my hearing loss, but it exacerbates. They both so. But yeah, that's how I deal with those situations.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm sure it is very true. People aren't going to think about how the two can correlate, but with mental health, and there are huge moves in society. We've seen major shifts in mm-hmm. the overall perception of what mental health is, but there are still so many underserved populations that there isn't enough understanding there. Mm-hmm. And so I appreciate you sharing that side because I think that there needs to be light shed on that for sure.
I agree. Yeah, definitely agree.
So how do you prepare mentally, emotionally, when you're entering a space that you know there will be limited accessibility options or it will be a little more challenging for you?
So if I know that where I'm going, if I have enough notice, I will try to see if I can bring someone with me, mm-hmm. whether that's my spouse or another family member or just anyone, to act as an intervener and for knowledge and an intervener in my case as someone who will repeat things for me, make sure I understand where to go, what to do, especially in louder environments. So that's kind of a big tool for me. But if I know I'm going to be alone, then I will usually look up the place beforehand and kind of try to find pictures of the inside if I can and try to get a little acquainted with what it is that I'm going to be dealing with. And I will blast music on my way there. I will. My radio's on the top. The people in the cars next to me will be looking at, what is this girl doing? But so I will just blast music, and believe it or not, it's Broadway music.
Really?
That's my therapy.
I love that.
I love the theater. I love Broadway. So I will be singing along to Hairspray or Les Mis or Hamilton, at the top of my lungs. So that is definitely a good way for me to put myself in a mind frame that's more positive, so I feel more confident walking into this space. I'm still, figuring out other ways that I can prepare myself before I walk into a space. Those are just like my basic things that help me. Another thing I do have, and this is an accessibility tool, is it's called the Roger. And what it is, it's basically a personal microphone. So it goes, for my case, it goes around the neck, kind of like a necklace, and you connect it to the cochlear implant, and basically it amplifies the world around you. It's a microphone, but only for you.
That is so cool.
And you're able to control the settings to where you emphasize like an individual's voice versus background noise. So there are ways to manage that. The Roger is not new, but the capability to adjust settings and all that is new. And it comes with this cochlear implant that I just got a couple months ago. So it's a tool that I'm still learning to use and learning to remember to take with me. That's a big one. And that's just one. And, there's more depending on the cochlear, depending on the person. But that is something that I've started using, and it's actually been really helpful because it helps me isolate the sound to where I need it to be versus just hearing everything from one cochlear implant, which is extremely overwhelming.
I'm sure. That is so incredible. The Roger, you said?
The Roger, yeah.
That is so cool. I love that. Okay, so I want to reflect on your story a bit as we wrap up, and really just how it helps to contribute to what we are trying to do here in our project this year. And it is shedding light on what storytelling is and how there are so many communities that, because of a lack of not just assistive technologies, but just awareness within society, that it's really holding people back in sharing their story. And so I hope that you just feel empowered, because that's really why I invited you here, why I wanted you here, to know that I think your story is so important. I want more people to hear your story, even if it's not reaching millions of people. I think any person that hears it will connect. There are so many people out there that aren't able to get even still the limited tools that are available now. So you have a really beautiful story. Just to hear, as a person growing up with it and as a parent, to be fostering your daughter through navigating this life that she's going to have ahead of her, it's very, very beautiful to hear. So thank you so much, Audra. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, of course.
Of course. So are there, as my last thought, what has your story taught you about self-resiliency and advocacy?
I have learned over the years that my story is a tool. A person who hears my story may not be able to directly relate to the experiences I've been through, but they can relate to the emotions that are tied to it. And that is what creates that empathy, and that's what creates those that's what builds those lasting relationships that help people feel connected. So I've been sharing my story for a long time in different capacities, in different areas of life. And it has taught me that not just about sharing the story and that people will listen, it's also taught me to listen to other people, which is also a skill that I really do think that everyone should have, is those active listening skills and the ability to empathize and relate as much as possible. Sometimes people just want to be heard. So part of what I do, like in my job, and also just as a human being, is I get to listen to people's stories, and I'm learning so many new things about the way the world works. And sometimes I pick up tips and tricks for things that apply to my own life. And I also I'm able to give them that feeling of, wow, someone's listening to me, someone cares, which I think we should have more of in our society, because that building those relationships is really what contributes to creating those communities. And I don't know if you can see this, but I have a tattoo that says resilience right here.
I love that.
It was a flash tattoo. It was like $20, but it was, it resonated with me because it's not just my hearing disability, it's my other disabilities, it's my other life experiences that made me the person who I am today. And the fact that I get to share that with people who want to listen and be able to listen to others makes life more meaningful for me, because that is something I've always loved. And and it fits with the theme of like the theme of storytelling, right? And that's something I've always loved. And that's something that is extremely powerful for me.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. And that's so beautiful to hear your thoughts on it. Thank you so much. Truly. Thank you so much, listeners, for joining us today with Audra Paletta on our episode, Redefining Accessibility, Audra on Building Inclusive Storytelling. We are really excited about the conversations we've had and the research that we have added to this project. I hope you join us for our upcoming episodes, and have a great day.